Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, "Let us go to Judea again." The disciples said to him, "Rabbi, the Judeans were just now trying to stone you, and you are going there again?" And Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them." After saying this, he told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to awaken him." The disciples said to him, "Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right." Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought that he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him." Thomas, who was called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died, but even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Mary said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of that blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
So Jesus' friend, the one whom he loved, Lazarus, was dead. And Lazarus was buried, and Lazarus was in the tomb for 4 days. And every good Jew knew that the soul never stayed with the body after 3 days. Lazarus was dead, 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 dead. And then Jesus arrives on the scene, and Martha rushes to him and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Every time people say women can't preach, I'm like, have you ever read this story? Jesus and Martha's conversation continues, and it is clear that Martha can imagine some of the good news, that there is resurrection of the dead, that there is eternal life. But that good news is not for now, right? It is for the future. "I know he will rise again on the last day," she says. Mary also comes to Jesus and makes the same statement of faith. "If you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died." She too believes in Jesus' eventual power over death, of good news at some point in the future. And Jesus has different words in his conversation with Mary. And it's clear when they get to the tomb and Jesus tells them to roll away the stone that Mary and Martha are not ready for resurrection right now. Eminently practical Martha, with no need of imagination, says, "Lord, there's a minor detail here you might be forgetting. There's already a stench. He has been dead for 4 days. Are you sure you want to do this?" "Yes, Martha. Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" And so they roll away the stone, which is an act of faith that, let's be clear, I'm not sure we can really imagine. They choose to disregard everything they know to be true about how the world works. They choose to trust that God can see life where they can only see death. It must have seemed like a zombie apocalypse more than a moment of good news, waiting to see what Jesus was going to do with an open tomb. "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus hears the voice of his shepherd. And Lazarus gets up out of the tomb and walks out into the light, still wrapped up in his grave clothes. While this is a story about Mary and Martha and Lazarus, I hope you notice there were other very important actors in it too. They are not alone in their grief. The community is all around them. And when Mary goes to see Jesus, the women go with her. Everyone's grief is different and it is personal, but it is never private. These women don't say anything, they don't offer platitudes, they just stand with their friend who is in pain and make sure she knows she is not alone. And they cry with her as she and Jesus cry. And there are people who are waiting at the tomb, and Jesus says, "Unbind him." Jesus is the only one who can call Lazarus to new life, but the crowd does the work of the unbinding. And I don't know how comfortable you would be with this task, but no law-abiding Jew would touch a dead body casually. And I suspect they were all trying to figure out how the law they knew applied to formerly dead bodies. The rabbis had never talked about that at Sunday school. But again, like Mary and Martha, they trust the voice of their shepherd, and they unbind Lazarus, and they free him of the trappings of death. And this story reminds me of why we gather as church. There are other things you could be doing today, right? We could be at brunch, but we come here and we take time out of our busy routines to gather together with other people, to gather as a church, and we could talk forever about the reasons we worship, but think about it. Why do we gather together as a community? Because community is messy and it is complicated. And as often as we love each other, or almost as often as we love each other, we sometimes hurt each other. And we support each other in life and in death, and when new life is waiting around the corner. I was with some of our new member class last night, and they were talking about this part of community. Today, it feels like we're somehow so separated in our lives that it can be almost difficult for us to know how to reach out into somebody else's life to offer help. It can be a struggle to get to know our neighbors. I just moved into a new condo, and I try to say hello to everyone in the hallway, but only a few people have said more than hello back. A couple have stopped and introduced themselves and said, "Did you just move in on the second floor? Welcome to the building." And I want to know my neighbors. I also don't want to freak them out by knocking on their door to introduce myself, right? Community is messy and complicated. But we need people to stand with us. We need people who know who we are, as Mary and Martha's friends did. But also when we just need to borrow a cup of sugar, or when we need a meal after we've had surgery. We need community that is willing to ask, "Do you need help?" when they see somebody struggling with their bags. One of the reminders of the Lazarus story is that while yes, there is eternal life and resurrection in the future, there is also new life right now, today. And our faith compels us to unbind people so that they may experience it. We have to let go of our belief that death and war and cruelty and corruption have the last word. We need to unbind people so that they can work to rid their lives of despair and addiction. We need to unbind people who have been hurt by religion so they can truly know and believe when we say you are God's beloved child, that they can believe it's for them, that you can believe it's for you. Deserving of new life today. And new life is not always easy. The community is called to the somewhat indelicate task of unshrouding a dead body so that he can return to life. How well do we do with Jesus' call to unbind people? It's great to talk about new life, but how do we do when formerly dead Lazaruses, I don't know what the plural is, show up in our midst? Do we obey the command to unbind them, helping usher them back towards new life? Or do we instead push them back into the tomb? I know we'd never admit to doing that, but think about addiction. I know that when someone climbs out of the tomb of addiction, it is often the people who love them the most who have the most trouble with their sobriety. Because we have a relationship with someone that is built around a particular way of behaving, and when something changes, we don't know what to do with that. Sometimes it is life on the other side of death that makes us the most uncomfortable. And this new life couldn't have been easy for Lazarus either. How do you walk into the grocery store after everybody was at your funeral? What was it like for him? He was so certain there was no future for him, and then indeed, there is a future. I guess I better pay that car payment after all, right? Would people invite a formerly dead man over for dinner? How would he fit in his community? His very life is testimony to the power of Jesus Christ, which means he was another one of the signs that we've been talking about in John's Gospel, one of the signs that points to Jesus. And that made him very unpopular with the religious leaders. Every time Lazarus walked into church, he threatened the religious establishment. Because when your life is testimony to the good news you've received, things can get risky. We are now in the season of Lent, which is a time of preparation for Easter. And you'd think that after experiencing resurrection for 2,000 years, we'd be better prepared for it. Yet somehow it always seems like a surprise. The rhythm of living and dying and rising is the story of our faith. It is the rhythm of our lives. We worship a man who rose from the dead after he had lived, after he had died. And if we pretend that death isn't necessary or a reality, or if we try to skip from living to rising, we deny that cycle of life and death, and we hang on to what God is calling us to let go of. If we pretend the messiness of community isn't necessary, then the living and dying and rising together through joy, we deny the promise and gift of community. If we pretend resurrection is impossible, we deny the promise of faith, and we will be unable to see the miracles in our midst. As I mentioned in the introduction at the start of worship, our work as a congregation and our work as Christians in the world is to be asking the questions, what among us is living? What is dying? What is rising? And it may be easier for us to see what is living. We can feel the energy right where it is here at church, but what do we as a church need to let die? What do we need to go ahead and just put in a tomb with faith that God will make new life emerge in ways that we cannot yet imagine? Because for us to be able to do well what God is calling us to do, we can't also keep doing all the things we have ever done before. And this is a messy and difficult part about being church, and your church leaders are in the middle of asking these questions of all of our programs and ministries. And it is hard because we love all the things that we do. But the truth is your staff is tired, exhausted, really. One of the ways we've managed the pastoral transition before I arrived 5 years ago and then the post-COVID return was to just keep trying new things to see what worked. And a lot of it worked. But the problem with doing all the new things is we didn't stop doing old things either. And not all of the things we tried are connected to our vision. And we cannot continue to manage the programs we're currently managing. So some ministries either will need to end or will really need to change and be led by members of the congregation and not by staff. And it will be hard because we like all the things we're doing. So when we invite you to join a ministry team, it is not a vague and theoretical invitation. It is a specific way for you to participate in the living and the dying and the rising at Calvary. What are the specific things God is calling you to do? Maybe it is to greet and welcome people when they come to worship or events. Maybe you're a cookie baker who wants to bring treats to coffee hour. Maybe you can coordinate volunteer teams who feed people at one of our Matthew 25 partners. Maybe you want to volunteer with children or youth. One of our recent new members volunteered to help out with something that used to have a volunteer coordinator and hadn't been done by a church member for a long time. And as soon as she stepped up and started helping with it, I realized how much of it I was doing. And it was not my job. And it's such a gift to have somebody else coming alongside to do their job so that I'm free to do mine. It's a huge relief. One of our questions is, what do we need to unbind? What are the things we thought for sure that we had lost forever and that God is offering back to us in new ways? It is our work as church to look for living and dying and rising. It's also our work in the world. Think about the stories you heard in the news this past week of corruption and abuse and cruelty, things that really ought to be dying, right? We ought to put them in a tomb because the stench of their rot is hurting all of us. Think about the people and the power systems that are propping up these corpses of cruelty, telling us that it is life. That is not life, my friends. The stench of death is all around it. And think about Lazarus again. Mary and Martha said, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But Lazarus needed to die in order to rise again. When he died, it was the correct thing for his loved ones to do, to put him in a tomb. Mary and Martha were correct to bury their brother. Even with their belief in resurrection, they could not resurrect him. Only God can do that. So what is living, we need to support. What is dying, we need to let die, no matter how much we love. Acknowledging death is not a failure of love, it is the courageous embodiment of it. So what in our society do we need to help live? And what do we need to let die? We don't get to choose what resurrection and rising will look like because we do not know God's timetable for it. We only know that death has to happen first. We cannot resurrect the dead, but we are the ones, once God calls them by name, who have to be ready to do the unbinding. We have to help people unbind from the wounds of their past. We have to help people unbind from the sins of their past, because new life has to be for all of us. Can we be a community that walks with people out of their tombs and into the new life that God is even now preparing? Lent calls us again and again to be Easter people, people who are looking for resurrection and who trust God may be imagining new life where we can only see death. Martha says to Jesus, even now, I know that God will give you what you ask of him. May that be our prayer as well. May we have hearts strong enough to break open with grief when death occurs. And may we have imagination strong enough to be on the lookout for the new life that God is even now creating. Amen.